Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Oh Ship. We really appreciate all of you who've been joining in every week. We're now on our 15th or 16th episode. It's getting better every week. We love seeing the same faces popping up in our chat and engaging with us on social. As always, whether you're tuning in on LinkedIn or Facebook or Twitter, please comment and ask any questions of our guests. And this week, we actually have a particularly fascinating, exciting guest. It's Brad Jakeman. Brad Jakeman, beyond some of his current roles we're going to talk about in a moment, when I first met him, was the president of the global beverages business at Pepsi. In the past, he's been the head of marketing at Activision Blizzard. As a big gaming nerd, I can't help but love that. He was the EVP of marketing at Macy's. He's just had a really, really, really incredible career. And when we were talking about what we wanted to talk about today on our ship and what was really inspiring him, he talked about the concept of having a portfolio career. And I think this is just so relevant for the way that people are working today, especially maybe through some of the accelerations that happened through COVID-19. But I'm also guessing that some of you right now are scratching your head and going, what is a portfolio career? And I guess you're going to have to stick around and find out on this week's episode of Oh Ship. Brad, welcome to the show. I'm so glad you're here on the show.
Thank you. It's so awesome to be here.
Yeah, you look like you are in a very, very lovely spot. Is that the lovely Brad's Beach House?
It is hashtag Brad's Beach House, and it is a gorgeous day here. And yeah, there are a lot worse places to be quarantining than out here.
Love it. I hope I get to visit one day. I always get the Instagram, Facebook.
There's an open invitation.
I would love that. So, I'm going to just kind of tee this off by explaining for those who have tuned in, who don't know what this concept of a portfolio career is. And this is basically this idea that, you don't have to take a traditional job in the way that maybe careers have built out like we have in the past. A portfolio career is made up of lots of different things that you build into a portfolio that for fulfilling you for different reasons, and you're making the career you want out of smaller components that create potentially a greater whole. When we started talking about this, I'd love to just find out, and I know we're going to get into what's making up your portfolio and what inspires you, but what inspired you? I mean, you had some pretty serious corporate roles to kind of flip the switch and say, I'm gonna try something totally new.
Yeah, totally. Look, I was very fortunate to be able to transition from something I really, really loved doing. And I always give people the advice when they tell me they're thinking about a career change. And I always ask them, is it something you're running toward, or is it something you're running from? And in my case, it was certainly running toward something that felt more exciting and kind of a better fit in my life right now. And the catalyst for it was, here I was in this amazing company working with an inspiring CEO in Indranui. And I was coming into the city one evening for dinner with my friends, none of whom worked in big companies like I did, and all of whom had portfolio careers. And of course, I was late because I got held up in the office. I was standing outside the restaurant doing a call with Asia, and I walk in 20 minutes late. And you know that moment where, everybody has been sitting at the table talking about you? That's what happened to me.
The awkward, did they try and do the awkward subject change on you?
They didn't, because what I realized is they were hoping that I would notice that because they were staging an intervention. Yeah. And I said, so what are you, it's clear you're talking about me, you're whining about the fact that I'm late again, right? And they're like, no, that's just built in. That's kind of built into your brand these days. What we were talking about and somewhat amused about was the fact that we have these low profile jobs, nobody's ever heard of us, and we have multiple things that we have going on. But you work 5 times harder than any of us, and we're all 10 times richer than you. And we have about 20 times more free time to spend with our friends and family than you. and we operate our careers from wherever we want to do it. And we're not in an office, and we're not traveling when we don't want to travel, and so on and so forth. And that became just a really amazing moment and paradigm shift for me, because when you're in kind of this paradigm that we in my generation get stuck in, you're taught to go from one company to another in increasingly senior roles and ultimately retire from one. I just realized none of that was relevant to me. I couldn't imagine another company that I wanted to work with or for that would be full time, that would be as special as PepsiCo and what I was doing there. And I also couldn't understand the concept of retirement and not kind of working and being involved in things that are creative and business oriented things and so on. So that's when I decided that I needed to make a significant shift.
And I have to ask, that's a pretty, it's kind of I don't call it smack in the face, but certainly a big moment when some your successful friends kind of rock your perception of how you wanted to run your career. Um, how long did it take you to kind of go, I'm going to rethink all this? Sometimes I feel like when I've heard people have similar moments, it's like, it takes years to kind of adapt and make the change. I actually, when I had a similar moment, I freaked out and quit my job the next day. I totally freaked out after I had done that, and I maybe did it a little too quickly. But I think we all handle it a little differently.
Yeah, well, let me tell you, Freddie, the output of freaking out once you leave is not at all a function of how long it has taken you to come to that decision.
Yeah, fair
Uh,
enough.
and what I did is after that, I always kind of in my life kind of what they're not officially called this, but I kind of have my personal board of directors, and they're people who are very close friends whose opinion and advice on on a range of things I really admire and respect. And so I convened that. And one of my friends, Cindy Gallup,
Yeah.
gave me this awesome piece of advice. She said, while you're at PepsiCo, carry around a notebook and on the back of it, draw up 3 columns. And during the course of a day, over a month, fill out these columns. The first column is all the activities that you're doing in the moment that you absolutely love doing, that inspire you, that you get in the car to drive home at night and go, wow, that was such an amazing experience. I really loved that, blah, blah, blah. Conversely, on the next column, write a list of all the things that are onerous and laborious and suck energy and creativity away from you, and write a list of those. And then the third column was the most insightful, and that is write down the conditions under which you enjoy working most. So, for instance, do you like working in teams or do you like working
Yeah.
at home? Do you like working in the office? Do you like working at home? Do you like traveling a lot or do you not like traveling a lot? Those sorts of things.
Yeah.
And when you have that, that becomes the filter for evaluating your what's next. And you'll never get everything in the first column, nothing in the second column, and everything in the third column. It won't ever work like that. But at least you're looking to over-index on the
Yeah.
first and second columns, and third columns, and under-index on the second. And so that's what I did. And my list was: I love entrepreneurism. I love involving anything involving the creative community and inventing and innovating new things. I love things that have a societal impact and social purpose. My second column were things like I hate bureaucracy. I hate meetings to be convened to talk about when the next meeting schedule should be. And all of those things that are necessary to keep big companies operating, but really kind of suck energy from you. And then the third is I wanted to be more flexibility. I wanted to be out here in my house by the beach a lot. I wanted to spend more time with my husband. I wanted to not travel as much as I do. And so they all became the criteria for which I have now defined my life.
I couldn't. First off, Cinnamon. I always hear nice things about her, and I like. She seems like she gives really great sage-like advice. You're
Yeah.
not the only person I've heard, kind of say that she's been given them good guidance. I can't help but think when this there's all this sense, I think, in what you're talking about, and being able to control your own destiny. I find that with really senior folks, that there's this big part that like, at least in my case, like, I don't mind driving off a cliff as long as I'm the one driving. And
Right.
I think, and I think knowing that you have a little bit of control over where your life is going, I think is part of also maybe what is comforting about the portfolio as
Yeah,
well.
at a macro sense, I would say at a macro sense, you're absolutely true. On a day-to-day micro sense, I actually
Mm.
feel like I have much less control over my day-to-day
Interesting.
than I had at PepsiCo. Because one of the downsides of having a portfolio career is you have all these things that are unrelated to each other,
Hmm.
all of which are imposing or
Mm.
demanding of your time. And a
Hmm.
lot of those things land on the same time slot in a day. And
Mm.
a lot of those things you can't say, well, hey, I'm doing this. Can we move that? Some things you can. But when you're in easily and the people that you are deprioritizing, will typically understand why you're reprioritizing something else. But next, and by the way, adding to my portfolio, I could decide that the portfolio career is something that doesn't work out either.
Yeah.
There's no kind of binary
People
decisions here.
and I know this doesn't apply to the type of roles you have, but one of my favorite quotes I've ran into a couple of years ago, I think it's just priceless. It was about entrepreneurs. It said, entrepreneurs, the only people in the world willing to work 80 hours a week so they don't have to work 40.
Exactly.
And I just thought that was just priceless. It just kind of
Totally. Yeah.
so,
I describe myself as the busiest unemployed person in America.
yeah. And so, the news just came out yesterday. I think I called it on Ad Week or Ad Age about you joining as a senior advisor for Boston Consulting Groups, a super reputable firm, obviously. But I know that's just, I guess, one part of the portfolio now. So, what make up the brand Jakeman portfolio career strategy, if you will?
Yeah, no, you're right. I'm joining around marketing in the organization, as you point out. But BCG is a formidable and amazing um, organization, and so I'm joining as a senior advisor there to help them on the marketing side, and I'm super excited about that. That's kind of one pillar of my portfolio career. The other is that I am the co-founder and managing partner of a social impact venture fund where we are deploying capital and our expertise to help entrepreneurs in the food and beverage space, not just consumer packaged goods, but everything from ag tech through to packaging technologies, processing technologies, ingredient technologies. And we're helping them to accomplish scale so that ultimately the foods that are produced by them are more affordably priced and therefore accessible to wider audiences, particularly
Wonderful.
um, less socioeconomically advantaged communities, communities of color, all of which over-index on kind of suffering from food shortages. So that's or healthy food options, I should say.
I feel like that's even more important now than especially with COVID and people being more focused on shopping versus restaurants and yeah, grocery shopping and getting foods that way. So that's wonderful.
Absolutely. And that is an amazing experience because I meet not only extraordinary entrepreneurs and investors, but we always feel like kind of we're moving the ball forward societally in that process as well. And so it's
And,
very, very exciting.
and a little bird told me you may actually have some big news to announce
I
there. And then
do. I wish we were talking in a couple of weeks. I'm about to have a very exciting partner join us at Rethink Food, and they are very known in the food space and in the entertainment space. So it's probably a reason for me to come back later and talk.
okay, well, I have my suspicions around who I think it might be, and when the news goes public, we'll be sure to share it here because I think it's great, and it's a great company that should be recognized and get as much, frankly, awareness as it can. So I'm excited for you.
Thank you. And then the third part of the portfolio is I sit on a number of boards, for-profit boards and not-for-profit boards. I'm on the board of the Humane Society, which is the largest advocacy organization for the protection and welfare of animals globally. I'm on the board of Reporters Without Borders, which protects free speech and the safety and security of journalists around the world. And the third is that I'm the chairman of the board of the LGBT Centre here in New York, which is the second largest centre of its kind serving the LGBTQ plus community. So That's also pretty exciting, and I'm also on a number of for-profit boards as well. So that kind of keeps my hand in what's happening in society, what's happening in business, and all of those things at some point intersect to some degree.
I love it, by the way. I think it's you're kind of checking all the little for a pretty very smart guy and ambitious guy. I think I can imagine this checks basically a lot of personal and professional check boxes for you to
Mhm.
satisfy all kind of little itches.
Yeah,
And I mean that in a really good way, and I get that. And my wife always teases me that like if I have even an extra free 5 hours in the week, I'll find something new to engage myself with that I like, otherwise I
hmm
get bored out of
yeah,
my mind. So I can
absolutely.
sympathize. Now, when you think about other people who may be listening to this, they're super inspired, they're maybe in their corporate job right now, but they weren't, maybe they're not in the C-suite, they don't have the kind of seniority, and or maybe their portfolio is not going to be a board seats or whatever. um, is there any advice you'd give people saying, hey, if you want to go and construct a portfolio career, this is how I think about it? Do they
Yeah,
take the Cindy Gallop advice route? Is it, or is there the Brad Jakeman checklist they should be thinking about?
yeah. No, I mean the Cindy Gallop, Brad Jakeman lens, I think, is a really good one to deploy. But I also would say I have to acknowledge that the privileged position that I come from as well, right? I have the financial means to be able to take a risk in my career, and not everybody has those financial means. In fact, the vast majority of people don't have those means. I mean, I've worked very, very hard and over a number of years to be able to do this, but I want to just pause and say my advice might be useful, but it comes from a position of
Yeah,
privilege
respect.
to
Understood.
acknowledge. I would say, look, now more than ever, through technology and the gig economy, a portfolio career is much more easily attainable than it was before. And people gave me advice along the way, but one of the big pieces of advice I got was to really kind of focus in on those areas of passion, because if you focus in on those areas of passion, you tend to be able to do a better job in those pursuits. And when you do a better job in those pursuits, they tend to be more fulfilling and more profitable to you as well. And that sounds very theoretical and idealistic, but it's actually the truth. Through experimenting with lots of different things since I left PepsiCo, I had no shortage of failures in that. And I would go down a path of working on some venture or with some partners and just realize that while it was maybe kind of going to be profitable and financially rewarding at some point, it had more of the components of the things in the second column that I talked about. And it just wasn't a compelling and exciting thing for me to do. So I kind of switched that. So one piece of advice is define your portfolio career not just through the lens that I talked about earlier of the three columns, but by really reflecting on what impact you want to have and what makes you happy. Like I think we're all looking at various stages of our career in defining the impact we have. And at some points in your career, it's the impact you have in a company at one point in time. When you get to my ancient status, you start thinking about, well, are places going to be better for me having been there? And can I look at the next generation in my life and for them to look at me and say, okay, he's doing something that's going to have a net positive effect on society? They're things that are important to me, not necessarily important to everybody else, but kind of really think through what are those things that are really going to make you happy? What are those things that are really going to cause you to have an impact? And just as importantly, what are those things that are going to make you financially independent and comfortable? I mean, that I have no shame in saying that a big component of this as well is kind of how we make money.
Mm. I have my own kind of spin and take on this, and um, it reminds me, just a small tangent, but connecting some dots. It reminds me of one of my favorite people, Gaston Legorburu, and he was one of the big kind of players, chief strategy officer at Publicis Sapient. At
Mhm.
Sapient was one of the key people who kind of helped bring Ikemoyan into Sapient. And my little agency, Ikemoyan, was whatever, sub 100 people, and Sapient was this rather big, behemoth of an organization. And I remember saying to him at one point, well, we've got this one client in this industry, and they don't want us to work with anyone else in that same industry because it's competitive. And I remember him saying, Freddie, that's a problem in Ikemoan, but at Sapient, we're big enough that, when you've got two people in the same category, it's a competitive issue. But when you have three, you have a practice. And I thought this was really damn funny at the time. But kind of connecting that thinking back to this concept of portfolio career, I think that sometimes a lot of the people watching right now may have what they don't perceive as a portfolio career, but I bet you a lot of people have a side hustle.
Right.
And that side hustle could be something they're passionate about as a specific project. It could be a passion project. It could be something they do just to make extra money. It could be a business they're starting while they're in their career. And maybe it's the same kind of thinking. Maybe when you've got one, it's a side hustle, but when you get two, or two or more, you get a portfolio career. And maybe some of the people can really start rethinking that through this lens of a portfolio career, instead of thinking about it as a side hustle. Why does it have to be one thing plus another thing? Why can't it be a strategy? Why can't it be a
Right.
vision for themselves? You might find, and I would say, for the answering my own kind of question earlier about what advice I would give someone if they wanted to go down this path, and maybe they don't have some of the luxuries of a built up lots of savings and things that allow them to take bigger risks. And start with that side hustle. You're going to work a lot of hours. You're gonna kick your own ass, if you will. But that there's sometimes the best things in life takes extra work to get there, and not the easiest path to follow. But once you get that initial bit set up, then you can expand from there. And if you get enough income on your side hustle, you can peel back another layer and insert another thing in there. And it's a little bit like making a good drink. You gotta find the right mix of elements to make it something you love and you're passionate about. And it's going to be different for everyone.
And what tends to happen, Freddie, is because you're kind of looking at multiple opportunities largely through the same filter. What you end up with typically is things in your portfolio that are highly complementary to each other. And I certainly found that as well. Like, my board work greatly influences my understanding of what's happening in society, that helps me with the venture fund, that helps me with my work at BCG. The work I do at BCG really helps me understand how the business world is shaping and dealing with macro issues like COVID-19 as one example. That helps me on the board side. It also helps me on the venture fund side. So I think that because you've chosen things through essentially the same lens, by definition, they tend to be highly complementary to each other, and therefore you perform better in each of those endeavors.
Uh, and not to put you on too much of a spot, but is there any, when you look back at maybe some of the parts of your career you've tested out over the years, and new ideas, any kind of, as we like to call them on the show, oh shit moments where you're like, that didn't work out exactly as I planned, but I learned a lot from it and maybe helped shape who you are today?
Yeah, I mean, I describe it as there's one in my life. And I describe it at the time, it was the worst career experience in my life, and I describe it now as one of the best. And that was my very short stint at Macy's.
Yeah.
And I joined Macy's, I think I only lasted there 11 months. Um,
I've had one of those. I feel you.
Yeah, and I was enamored by what the leadership team there had told me that they wanted to accomplish. And I thought I'd done an incredibly rigorous assessment before I got there, and talking to lots of people in the organization and in senior leadership roles and peers to really make sure that I was getting a consistent story, which I did. But I showed up, and literally on my first day, I was like, wow, I think I've just joined a company that wants to change without changing anything. And it was absolutely right. I spent most of my time with feeling like I walked down the corridors with a big flashing light above my head that says, doesn't know retail, doesn't know retail, doesn't know retail. I was tissue rejected. It was very hard for me to get a change agenda implemented because there were just kind of forces opposed to it all over the place. Culturally, I mean, it goes back to that very famous quote that culture eats strategy for breakfast. And that's absolutely what happened at Macy's. When I look back on that, and so it was an extremely painful experience. I hated going into work every day. Um, it ended sooner than I wanted, obviously, but very amicably. But I look back on that now, and I learned so much from that experience. I learned how to drive a change agenda through an organization by bringing people along with you versus doing things that might cause armies to form internally up against you. The importance of communication, the importance of so many things. And I took that, and that's what largely I relied on when I was driving a change agenda at PepsiCo, looking at all of those things that worked at Macy's, that didn't work at Macy's. And while it was a super painful lesson to learn, I really took a lot of valuable lessons out of it.
Mhm. Sometimes those really brutal ones, they can be challenging, stressful, disheartening, frankly, a bit humbling. But they do make you better for it. I certainly had one of those. Out of interest, did you have to move across the country for that one, or was it at least a local job?
No, no, Macy's was, although it's headquartered in Cincinnati, all of the leadership team pretty much were based in New York.
My
So
my
that
my
would
my,
have made
my nightmare one, I moved from Miami up to New York, and yeah, even sold my house. So I like I double screwed it basically. Thankful my wife is a very tolerant,
a-
forgiving woman. So yeah, similar. So no shit.
Yeah,
Uh,
I mean, but those things, like, you just take learning from them. I mean, I think we just live in this world right now, particularly in the era of keyboard warriors and cancel culture and everything like that, that one mistake it can be fatal. And I think fatal to your career, fatal to your reputation, and that's just not how it should be.
I
It
agree.
should be that that I learn more from the things that I screw up than the things I get right. Um,
I totally agree.
so I just think there just has to be a much
We
greater.
become too intolerant. I mean, this is really the spirit of what our ship is all about at the end of the day. And as I say on every episode, it's there are lots of forums for us to all pat each other on the back and tell that story of what a genius you are, and everyone loves to sing sing those praises and tell those stories. But I don't think there's enough forums of telling having people who've had great success, but going, you know what? I totally screwed the pooch, not once or twice or three
Oh,
times, but
no. I
more
mean,
times than I can even remember. And that's fine. It's fine. It's
totally.
just part of the experience.
I wish this segment was longer. I could give you a whole
Exactly right.
all day, but
So I've
that's
had
really
people tell me, "Oh, ship was like therapy for them." So, um, I think it just for me, I don't know about you, but when if someone can't acknowledge any kind of screw ups, actually makes me kind of distrustful of them. I've heard that actually investors even feel that way. It became sort of and there's a lot of VCs and P firms out there that they won't even invest in folks unless they've got one failure under your belt. Because if you don't know what failure looks like, maybe you can't see it coming at you. So, in this gorgeous head of hair of mine has had its fair share of failure. So, but I'm lucky to have had some good wins too. Um, just a couple final thoughts, before we kind of wrap up. And again, so thankful that you're tuning in. today. For everyone, anyone who's got any questions, just want to put out there, if I haven't addressed them in real time, because they've been popping up on my screen, feel free to leave them in the comments section and we can respond to them later. But I guess my final question would be, do you think that the whole concept of a portfolio career, is that easier or harder because of COVID-19, or does it not impact it at all? Is that just a macro trend of the modern age?
Well, I think nothing's easier because of COVID-19.
Fair enough.
Definition. Um,
Getting people on a video call, that's easier.
I mean, yeah, exactly. I find meetings start and finish on time. I think that's
Yeah.
a little easier with COVID-19, but no, I think COVID-19 has profoundly changed so many aspects of our working life. I mean, having, as you said, I was announced yesterday as joining BCG as a senior advisor. Just trying to understand the culture of the organization and meet and form relationships with people who I need to have kind of connections with is so much harder when you feel like you spend your whole day on the opening sequence of Celebrity Squares, and it's just hard to get to know people, and it's hard, I think, from a efficiency point of view. It's also hard physically as well. I mean, we stare at these backlit screens all day, and the cognitive energy that it takes to kind of read body language and to make sure that you're not interrupting someone at a critical point, and so on and so forth, takes a lot more energy, I find, than a conference call might, or that an in-person meeting might. So no, I don't think anything's easier through COVID. I think that I do think that when we come out of COVID, there'll be some really valuable things that we should be codifying now and continue with. And one of them is this notion that, you know what, we don't all have to be at the same place at the same time to run an effective company. We need to be at the same place at the same time sometimes, which we don't have the ability to do now, but not all the time. And when you think about that, think about the access that opens up for people who've never really had a voice at the innovation and decision-making table. Women with small children who can't afford daycare, disabled people who can't make it into an office. All of a sudden, the workplace may be more open to them to participate and have their voices come to the table and shape decisions of big companies, certainly. And so I think there'll be some good things that come out of it. But no, I would use a highly technical term to describe the process of running business in COVID, and that is sucky.
You know, I was going to ask another question, but that's such a perfect place to end our shift that I think we're going to leave it at that. That's a good, we'll be quoting that later. So, you know, again, I will say the kind of one final thought, which I would say that one nice thing that finding a positive on it, I do think if you're looking to build a portfolio career, there's less of a requirement that you are physically at the office, as you noted. And I do think that opens the doors to participate in more types of businesses, organizations, opportunities, wherever they may be around the world. Doesn't even have to be in the country that you live in. And I think that that's quite liberating. But it certainly has its moments where, to quote you, is sucky.
Yeah.
Brad, it was so good to see you. I hope the next time is in person, having a drink at either your place or my place. But keep your spirits high. Congrats on the new role and expanding your amazing portfolio career.
Thank you so much, Freddie. Have a great evening.